I'm not big enough. Make it tough.
Cars? No? Why? You did? You okay? Your car? How's that? Oh, bummer. Oh, dude. How's your insurance? Oh, it's his fault. Okay.
Trying to get a new small group guy out of it. He's a really cool dude. Former college student. He was like taking a semester off. And I'm like, all right, I can work this.
Yeah, come on, dude. Come on. I'll be kind to you if you come hang out with me. That's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah, he said that it was like done for. What's up, dude? You good? How about you? Good talk.
Good talk.
We're trying to intimidate Nate.
All right, bring it on. I'm so intimidated.
You look scared.
I'm so terrified. Some more than others.
Hey, friends of Chi Alpha, this is Steve Pike with Urban Islands Project, and I've been invited by Spanky to talk to you guys about kind of what's next. You're graduating from Chi Alpha, and you've got, as they like to say, your whole life ahead of you, and how do you make the most of that? And I've got some thoughts for you today about that. I'm a really big fan of Chi Alpha for a lot of reasons, but if I had to choose one, it's the strong commitment of Chi Alpha to living out discipleship as a lifestyle. And speaking on behalf of the Church in America, we desperately need people like you who've integrated the practice of making disciples into the normal rhythm of your life. We need you to teach us how to just be disciple makers like you. The lifestyle disciple making ability is a skill that has faded in the church at large, and the results have been catastrophic. In fact, over the past 20 years, the number of Americans who claim to be Christians has dropped from 70% to nearly 50%, while at the same time, the number of Americans claiming no faith whatsoever has skyrocketed from 7% to nearly 25%. That's just wrong. That's unacceptable. The American church needs discipleship practitioners like you to show us the way back to missional effectiveness. Please don't graduate from Chi Alpha. Settle into your career and quietly take a backseat in a church somewhere. May I challenge you to take a different path. Imagine what it would look like if every Chi Alpha grad not only became a proficient practitioner of your chosen vocation, but also became a proactive disciple maker, helping activate other followers of Christ to become disciple makers as well. I believe Chi Alpha graduates have the potential to be the spark of the greatest spiritual revolution the world has ever seen. I think I should say that again, because I actually believe that. I think that because of what you've been through in your experience in Chi Alpha, because of the context that you've been through it in a context that very much reflects kind of the future, it's the trend where America's heading in terms of the culture, attitudes, and ideas, the dominant thinking, all of that stuff. That's where America's going. You've been living in that already, and you've learned to function as healthy disciple makers in that environment. And if there's ever a time when we need people like you to step up and lead the way forward, it's now. And I really do believe that will spark a spiritual revival, whatever you want to call it, a revolution that the world has never seen before. And I'd especially like to see you move into core urban communities that have been neglected by the church for decades and help start new neighborhood-focused faith communities in the urban core communities of every great American city. I just think that Chi Alpha has been a great spiritual formation place for you to either begin your walk with Christ or strengthen your walk with Christ. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you to pay it forward and bless, not only be blessed, but bless the church now and the church to come and generations to come with helping activate lifestyle discipleship practices in the church again. And the urban communities are one of the neediest places. It's one of the most crucial, one of the most neglected places that needs the attention of the church now. So one of the ideas that I have is seeing even groups of Chi Alpha grads moving into communities together, either with somebody designated as a church planner or just simply as a missional community, and saying we're going to make it really difficult for people who live in this neighborhood, this urban neighborhood, to walk away from God or to stay away from God or to go to hell. We don't want that to happen. We want to make it hard for them to do that. And so it would be my privilege to help you find a new urban-focused church start to be part of, a new church that's forming. It's a great place to engage in a church, is at the very beginning. You can help make it what it's going to become. And if you'd like to explore this idea, please contact me at steve@uip.city. That's steve@uip.city. One more time, steve@uip.city. Hey, thanks for your time and attention today, and I'm glad we're on the same team.
That was Steve Pike. In the church planting world in the U.S., he is a well-known name and figure. He created a entity called Urban Islands most recently, after other roles that he's had around the country. And he works trying to bring the church back into these urban settings where oftentimes they've been neglected. And I was just talking with him fairly recently when he made the comment that with what's happening with like the Acts Together, which is a group of our alumni in Denver, he's been able to kind of walk with them, help them, and watch them. And he's made comment that they have probably taught him a lot about what the future of church needs to look like in the country. So here's this like pretty substantial figure, and he's just identifying that even in his experience, what you guys are learning in discipleship is what they need, is what the church needs in America, maybe more than anything else. And so today we are going to start diving into a lot more of the practical things about our method and our concept of discipleship. And broadly, we're going to be talking about kind of three things. There's find, fight for, and feed. And we got some weird feedback, so if I need to cut this thing, I can. They could probably hear me okay. But the find, fight for, and feed, that is kind of like a big picture way of articulating what we try to do and the progression of it. And so today we're going to be talking about finding, and we're going to kind of go into that for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll start talking about fighting for people. Not fighting people, but fighting for people and what that looks like. And then feeding. But when we talk about finding, what we're talking about is fairly straightforward. It means that we are trying to find people that we can minister to, that we can begin to pour into. And it's not as simple as just saying, hey, I just find someone, because there has to be some way to break that down, right? Like, okay, I just find anyone in the world, anyone based on what? Anyone who would be my friend, okay? That can be a good angle to approach it with. But like, what are we looking for when we say like we're finding people? Because what we're going to talk about when we get to fighting for is the idea of fighting for them to experience you, your friendship with them, your community, and Jesus. That we have found that really those three things are needed. They need to experience those. Doesn't mean that they're even bought in. That just because you found somebody who said, hey, be part of my small group community, does not mean that they're going to be interested. I'm almost guaranteed they're not. But if you find people and you're going to be fighting for them to have those experiences with you, with your community, to experience Jesus in their life, to experience your community in your life, and through that, you're going to be able to start getting them to buy into your small group community and start to feed them the kingdom of God, where you're not just trying to get them to experience those things, but to now emulate the kingdom of God in their life, to impart the kingdom into their life. And so the first step is finding, and this is oftentimes kind of the scariest one to most people at first. Like, this is like, hey, okay, how do I actually go out there and meet somebody? But honestly, this could be a lot of fun. And we often have any number of LTC students who just talk about how much fun it is when they start to go out there and start to meet people and start to reach out to people and start realizing that the Lord can work through them in that way. It's a pretty cool thing. And so we're going to get into like some real practicals today, and you guys are going to be going into some real practical things with outreach from here, and we'll get to that here later. But when we talk about finding people to fight for, we have kind of two different lenses that we look at. And one lens that we look at is intentional outreach. And that's primarily what we're going to be focusing on today, is intentional outreach. Now, when we say intentional outreach, think like, sort of like almost like a missions trip kind of thing. You're going out of your world to reach out to someone else's world and to connect with them for some purpose, some reason. So you're leaving your space, but in campus ministry, you guys do that at a smaller level as small group leaders. If you ever go Join us on leadership. We'll be asking you to join us during Welcome Week, and we meet lots of people. A lot of you guys were met by a small group leader during Welcome Week. That was not that seniors' world. They were not hanging out on the campus during Welcome Week naturally, but they were intentionally reaching out because they realized there's this moment to connect with you, and they wanted to take advantage of that moment. So intentional outreach is reaching out outside of your world to intentionally try to connect with the broader world around you. So it's kind of going from Jerusalem to Judea, if you will. And so we're spreading out just a little bit, not too far, but we're just kind of spreading out just a little ways past what our natural world is. We'll also talk about the other concept of a lifestyle of ministry, which is far more looking around your world, the natural relationships you have, whether or not they're part of your small group or part of your community, but the larger worlds that you are naturally part of, and learning how to be a minister to that world as well. And small group leaders find if you're learning how to do both, that is where health in a small group community typically comes from. That's where people come from. They come from any number of places. It's that roommate who I was just ministering to last week because they're having a hard time, and invited them to come hang out with my small group community, and they're starting to get connected. And it's that freshman that I met last week on the plaza who just, is from out of state. And it's that international students that I happened upon at my class and started to get to know them. And it's any number of different angles, but primarily what we're talking about is intentional outreach today. However, what I'm going to first start talking about is the 3 criteria that we're looking for. And that really is the criteria for either of those 2 areas, whether it's intentional outreach or life of ministry. We're kind of looking for 3 things and 1 filter, we say. So we're going to dive into that. Now, this is just going to be a resource for you guys in the days to come. We're continuing to honestly actively develop it even now, but this is our website. If you actually go to xacsu.com, you go over to Small Group Leader Resources, you click on the finding. Yeah, if you want to go back, you can, bro. It's up to you. But you go over to the finding section. Yeah, go for it. And we'll be showing this to you guys here. This is just kind of a reference and a resource for you. But if you go over to resources and go over to Small Group Leader Resources, right there in the center of the page, there's Brent and me. Go down. Right today we're focusing on finding, so how to create and lead a small group. Then we have what convictions to impart to your small group, and how do you impart the convictions to your small group. So we're going to be talking about all of these things throughout LTC, but today we're focusing on that first step there, finding. So you can kind of go through there, and right now we're focused on who are you looking for? Who are you looking for? And we can kind of work through that from there. But in John Chapter 17, Jesus says, "My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me." And so this is Jesus' prayer, talking like, hey, this is my heart. This is what I'm trying to do. We talked about this here, I think, a couple of weeks ago. This is sort of the manifesto of Christ right before he goes to the cross. This is the whole thing I'm trying to accomplish through the cross, the sense of unity, and unity that we see that comes through the disciples' message, is through the disciples' lives. So you see in that the responsibility expressed through their lives, and the goal in that to see them, the world, come to know, this larger community, that through the message that there's this coming together of unity with each other. And so you see the larger community and of God. And so this community that's focused on Christ at the center of it. And so when we talk about going out, there's a lot of interesting passages that talk about sort of different ideas. Even Jesus talks about these different ideas throughout Scripture of we think of like the rich young ruler who walks away. And Jesus, we would all be like, oh, it's okay, just hang out, chill, it'll be fine. But Jesus actually let him walk away, that there is a filtering that does have to happen, because you only have so much to give. You only have one life to live, and so you should be fighting for those who are at a place to receive, to respond, and to really seek out that sense of unity. I don't say this is contrary to relationship. This is seeking authentic relationship. I'm not looking for friends. I can make any number of friends. I've got plenty of Facebook connections, whatever. But I'm looking for brothers. I'm looking for kingdom relationships. I'm looking for an authentic sense of community around my life. And so for that to happen, I'm looking for something deeper. And I'm filtering people through that. We all filter who we can connect with through certain things. I mean, some of it may just be convenience. I'm going to just be friends with whoever is most convenient and makes me do the least amount of work. So it's the relationships of convenience in my life. Or maybe it's from particular hobbies or interests or certain kinds of chemistry in my mind. I think, okay, this has sort of met that criteria. When we talk about the kingdom of God, we're talking about this idea that there are some things we're looking for in who we're going to fight for, because otherwise we just can't fight for them otherwise. And it's not because hey, you're not good enough, but because you're not willing to engage in the way that I'm seeking to engage with you in relationship. And so the rich young ruler walks away, and Jesus talks about pearls before swine, and we have these different things that there is this idea there. But how do we filter that? Well, there's any number of ways we probably could talk about that and think about that. But the way that we break it down is simply this, is that are they okay? Doesn't mean they have to want all three of these. That's the last thing, the condition. But are they okay with you? Right? If you meet some freshman next year and they're just kind of don't seem very interested, right? They're just there's not chemistry, or you have nothing in common, or maybe they would awkwardly give you their number because you asked for it, but there's no interest in you or that connection. They're just I just want to go party or hang out with my roommates or whatever. If they don't want you, you can't pursue that sense of kingdom relationship. You're going to pursue them, and they're going to be running away. It's like trying to force that boyfriend or girlfriend or that potential relationship in your life, that if they don't want it, you can't force that relationship, right? So they have to be okay with you. They have to be okay with the idea of a friendship with you. Are they okay with Jesus? This is the one that oftentimes small group leaders will get sort of in trouble with a little bit. They're like, oh, I got this guy who's okay with hanging out with me, and through osmosis, I think Jesus will just kind of, happen through that. It's no, they have to be okay with Jesus. Now, that does not mean that they have to want Jesus, but they have to be okay with him being around. They have to be okay with him being part of the friendship. And I can't remember if I mentioned the story that, just the example that I often will use is the story of Dima. I can't remember if I used that one or not in LTC, but Dima was this guy in Russia that Brent met, and I remember Brent talking with me, and I asked him, who are your guys? Who are really, there's all these Russians that were kind of curious because we're Americans, and they wanted to have an English partner and talk in English and stuff, but they weren't really friends. So I was like, who are your guys? And he mentioned Dima, and I thought, man, nothing's going to happen with that. Dima has no interest in Jesus, has no interest in, he was okay with the community, but he really liked Brent. He really loved the time they had with Brent. And the funny thing, though, was Brent just kept bringing Jesus into the friendship. Sometimes we just jokingly say, embrace your awkward. But Brent just kept going there. He just kept, asking him questions or praying for him or bringing up the Lord when he could and asking him his thoughts on this thought or that thing the Lord was doing or teaching him. And Dima just kind of endured it. It was in his mind at first, it was just kind of the price he paid to be friends with Brent, that sometimes Brent would bring Jesus into the friendship. But he was okay with that. And then through that friendship, he started engaging more and more with the community. And he was okay with the community. He wasn't particularly interested in having a bunch of American friends. In fact, I talked to him years later, or not years later, but some time later, and he said, if you had told me that my best friend and a bunch of my friends would be Americans. He said, I mean, he grew up in that country Russian environment, kind of stereotypical, still living out the kind of the Cold War fantasy a little bit. And he was just like, man, you tell me like a bunch of Americans would be my friends in my community. He's like, I would have laughed at in your face like a year ago, but here I am. And so he was okay with that. He wasn't even interested in the community. He wasn't interested in being a friend with an American. He certainly wasn't interested in Jesus, but he was okay with those things. But through that friendship, he really did love the interaction he had with Brent. And through that love that he had with Brent, that developed into a love for the community. And he started engaging more and more with the community. And through that community, he started engaging more and more with Jesus, because we were talking about the Lord and we were expressing our love for Jesus and we were living out our Christian community. And through that interaction, the amazing thing is people fall in love with what people love who they love. You catch that? You will fall in love with what people who you love, what they love. And if you love Jesus, and you're not ashamed of that, and you're not scared of that, and you don't hide that, if they love you, eventually they will fall in love with Jesus, or their love for you will grow cold and they'll walk away. They'll filter themselves out. You just have to be authentic enough to let that relationship be authentic. And so are they okay with you? Are they okay with your community? Are they okay with Jesus? And so you have to bring Jesus into that friendship. You have to bring him into that relationship. Now, that does not mean that he needs to be the center of that relationship. This almost sounds like almost heretical sometimes, but I know, like, at this point in my ministry career, I'm pretty decent at bringing Jesus into the friendship, right? Like, I can just kind of like turn it on, go there. It doesn't seem very hard for me anymore to just kind of like have that conversation. And so there's regular times where like, hey, I'm going camping with some guys, or we're just like hanging out around, somebody's living room or something, and I'll just go there. But I sometimes also stop going there. Like, I'll just immediately like, okay, this guy is not there yet. I want him to interact with Jesus, but I want him to like love the community, because what he wants is the friendship right now. What he wants is the community. And so if I force it to be about Jesus, then he doesn't want that yet, but he wants the community. So I'll definitely go there to make sure the foundation of Christ is there with us, that we're part of, we're living that out. But I won't force the friendship to be about Jesus. I'll start with what they want. I'll start by prioritizing what they want and inviting in what they need. I start with where they're at, and I bring them to where they need to be. And so I'm going to start, if they want me, then, hey, we're going to be friends. And I'm going to bring Jesus into that friendship. I'm going to invite him through my friendship to interact with my community. And we'll keep moving forward in that deeper sense of authentic relationship. Sometimes you get the Christian kid from high school, and he wants Jesus. He loves the Lord, that kind of thing. But if he doesn't want the community, it's like, hey, there's a lot of great communities out there. Good luck. Or the chemistry isn't right with you. It's like, hey, you know what? Maybe this other small group leader would love to, connect with you or hang out for whatever reason. Like, yeah, your schedules are totally different. They're a grad student. You're a sophomore in college, right? Something about just life stage or something just isn't clicking quite right, right? Like, it has to have all three. You have to have all three. And so, are they okay with Jesus? Are they okay with your community? And do they want one of those three things? Do they want one of those? Because if they're okay with you, Jesus, in your community, but they don't want one, then guess what? It's still not going to go anywhere. Still not going to go anywhere. Because they don't want anything. There's no foundation to work from. But if you find that, hey, okay, they're okay with one of those, or they're okay with all three and they want one of those, then you can start from there and start building from there. I love this book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. If you've ever read it, if you haven't, it's a great introduction. If you're like, I'm not a reader, become a reader. But this is a great place to start. This is a great place. It's just a story, but it's actually about a guy in college who grew up in America. He's kind of a third culture kid, if you know what that means. His family were I think Persian, and he was here, and he was Muslim by heritage for sure. And he kind of grew up in America. His parents had always taught him how to like defend Islam from, Christians who don't know what they're talking about. And then he came to college, so he had this kind of supremacy concept in his mind that this is why Islam's so much better than Christianity. And then he came to college and met a Christian in college who was a friend of his, or became a friend of his, became really his best friend. And what's interesting is in that friendship, he suddenly found a Christian who knew what he was talking about. And didn't always have all the answers, but they journeyed together. It's like, well, let's look at that and let's talk about that. And it was that friendship, and the book is fascinating because it kind of talks about a number of these different concepts we talk about, although it's just in a different light. But it was through the interaction with that friend that was very open to bringing Jesus into that friendship, talking about their faith, even though this is like, well, yeah, you're a Muslim, I'm a Christian, like, could that be kind of like awkward or weird? Yes. In fact, he said the only reason why he could handle the truth of the gospel that his friend presented was because of the friendship was strong enough to handle it. He said, I would have walked away long before that if it wasn't for the friendship that they had with each other. It was sometimes we talk about a love encounter, a truth encounter, and a power encounter. He had this love encounter with this guy. This guy loved him, and he loved this guy, invited him into community at times to experience that. Through the interaction of him and his larger community, was experiencing through that friendship power encounter, or truth encounter. They were presenting the gospel, and they were talking about some apologetics for sure of Islam versus Christianity and how did all that work. And then ultimately brought him to this place of saying, God, who are you really? And when he suddenly started praying, God, who are you really? Not as the Pharisee in judgment over Jesus, but as doubting Thomas saying, who are you? I'll bow, but I have to know first. And all of a sudden, God starts showing up, and suddenly he has this power encounter. He starts having these visions and these dreams, and these situations happen, and all these things, and it's very divine. It's a really cool story. And he eventually would give his life to the Lord. Sadly, he just died here about 3 years ago, but he's like my age. He's kind of a little older than me. But maybe the only argument anyone could have made against him in his story was that, you became kind of famous, you got, notoriety and stuff in Christianity for all of this. And to his dying day, he was basically like, I'm going to heaven, and I know who I'm going to. And it was like the last argument of his life was answered to the skeptics, that this man was living for Jesus alone. So anyway, the point is we need these three. Without all three, we get in trouble. And I've watched a lot of young student leaders, small group leaders, find that they're okay with two of these or one of these, and they think it's enough, and I watch the struggle, because if they're okay with you but not Jesus, you just think eventually this is going to come through osmosis, it's going to happen, and guess what? It never will. And you have to, the proclamation of the gospel, the truth presented, and through that friendship, you have to be able and willing. And so we kind of talk about laying the foundation of Jesus so it's not weird later or awkward later. It's not a bait and switch later. And we'll kind of get to that when we talk about how to meet people. If they're okay with Jesus, but not you in the community, you're still not going anywhere. It's like, yeah, you and Jesus can have a powwow somewhere where I'm not at, because it's not going to work otherwise. And some people are really just hungry for community. But with community, again, there's going to be a natural filtering of their life if they're not okay with Jesus, because he's going to be around in our community. And if we're not hiding our light under a bushel, so to speak, in our life, which we shouldn't, then they're going to filter anyway. So we want to set the friendship up to where these things are in the friendship, even though we start with where they want, what they want, and move from there. And so, some easy things to just think about, like bring Chi Alpha up anytime you have a conversation with somebody new. That's an easy idea just to kind of get in the habit of, especially if you're in that season of trying to look for people to fight for. The question then comes up, well, what do I do? Well, you know what? We're going to get to that when we talk about like 6 steps to meeting someone. So let's actually jump into that. Let's talk about real practically, okay, so how do we go there? How do we figure that out? How do we build the connection in intentional outreach where we can kind of go there? Now, in life of ministry, it's a little different, and we'll talk about that later. I think we're going to get to that next week. But in life of ministry, which is like, hey, ministering to the relationships that are natural to your life, to your world, we kind of start with a different way of thinking about this. But if you're going out there, just like a mission trip, if you're going out there during Welcome Week and trying to have a conversation with a bunch of freshmen, how do you start that conversation, right? And you guys are actually going to go out even this week and try to strike up conversations with people. And like, how do I do that? How do I start that conversation? So here's some just basic steps, but over the years we have found that these are really helpful. LTC students always say even these 6 steps are some of the most helpful things in the idea of finding that it's very tangible. This is not to be overly rigid, take this, edit it, it's just an outline. But it's an outline that you can work from as you think through how do I reach out. So first thing, place yourself. It's almost too obvious, and yet you're not going to find anyone in your prayer closet at your house. I'm sorry. That's not a jab, of course, to the necessity of prayer. But just to say, if you pray, they will not come. You've got to get out there. You got to put yourself in a place to succeed. And I remember going out during Welcome Week a couple years ago with a small group leader, and we were just meeting freshmen moving into the dorms, and I tried to kind of like show him what to do with 1 or 2 move-ins that we had. And I said, hey, why don't you just take point this next go around? And he said, okay. So we met these people. This dude was moving into the dorm, and I thought, you know what? My job oftentimes is to play like defense with the parents, comically. So I'll chat up the parents so the small group leader can actually talk to the student. Sometimes it can be like the kiss of death when mom comes over, oh, this is perfect. This is what you should, this is your youth group. You should totally do this. It's like kiss of death. Student's like, peace out. So I just kind of chat with the parents, and the small group leader's talking. And so Jonathan was just talking with this student, and they were walking up these flight of stairs. I can't remember what dorm they were. They were over near AV we were. And all of a sudden, they were chatting, and the student, this freshman, said, oh, you're Pastor Jonathan. Now, Jonathan's like a junior in college. He's, he was like, Pastor, what? But he was Jonathan. He was like, and we had actually gotten this guy's contact from some youth pastor or some Christian high school or something. I can't remember how. And we had actually handed this contact to Jonathan at the start of the summer. Said, hey, if you're willing to go out there and reach out to this guy over the summer, you can have this contact. And he said, okay. And I reached out and never was able to really connect with this guy. The whole summer, just, never really, you try to call and the guy would never answer, or he tried to do whatever. So the whole summer went through, he just kind of gave up on that contact, thought nothing of it. And randomly, I'm like, all right, Jonathan, why don't you go try to start this conversation. Sure enough, the Lord, out of whatever 6,000, 7,000 new freshmen that were walking in, it was the guy that he was supposed to be connecting with over the summer. Now that was the Lord, right? He's like, oh, you're the guy that's been pursuing me all summer. Oh, yeah. Hey, how's it going? Wow, you're like everywhere. And so when we step out, the Lord will step in, but we have to step out. And so place yourself. Go to the cafeteria over lunch, just an easy example. Go find that person sitting by themselves, ask if you can sit down, strike up the conversation, go from there. Spend an afternoon playing ultimate frisbee on the IM fields, or whatever, volleyball or whatever is always out there at the outside the Torms right last fall. Prioritize Welcome Week. I'll tell you, like, honestly, Welcome Week, we just meet a lot of people that are part of our community for the year during Welcome Week. And so just, thinking through that schedule and prioritizing that time. We talk about it, like, just treat it like a mission trip. Like, if you're a small group leader, that Welcome Week, it's like a mission trip for you. But it's one that gets you keep going. Mission trips are always sad because you build these connections. And it's like, oh, well, connect with the ministry. I hope maybe I'll see you next year if I come. But this one, it's like a week of like missions, but you keep going with it, which is so cool. So place yourself in a place to find people. And so get out there. And this week, it's going to be like, hey, okay, place yourself. We'll talk about some practical things you could do this week to place yourself, to try to find people. And then we'll start that conversation. So we're going to actually stop right here from step one. We're going to stop right here, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll start back up with a video, and we'll keep going with these 6 steps. If you have questions, we're going to have a little Q&A at the end. If you guys have questions, text Chad. My handwriting is amazing, I know. And so text 623-670-8056. That is a 6, and at least in my mind. And text Chad any questions you've got. We'll have a little Q&A at the end here. But why don't we take till 7:50, and then we'll start back up with another video from one of our alumni who talked about small group leading, what it taught him as he became a career person. All right, career person, marketplace, an accountant, a CPA. All right, yo. That's the funny thing about this year is, like, authentically nobody knows.
What's up, boys? Yeah.
It is a good need. I like it.
There's nobody here today.
Gone through places and places, but I left the scene. Yeah, and
I hadn't looked at Homework from all weekend until like 12 o'clock today. Is that good or bad? I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I didn't look at it, but now I'm just gonna have to sacrifice it to the assignments. It's the worst.
We don't work on Saturday.
My best friends are back home. We work together at car wash. Our boss was trying to get me to work on Saturdays. And he like scheduled us after like Jason and shit, like, no, I gotta work on Saturdays. And so he was like coming to us the other day, and Kevin was like, boss, I was like, Jerry, you're coming in tomorrow. And sir, tomorrow's the Lord's day. And he's like real frustrated. He's like, no, tomorrow's Kevin's day. He's like, no sir, tomorrow's Lord's day.
Kevin's there with the Lord.
And he respected it.
That's good.
After that, he was like, wow, he's not budging.
That's good for him, dude. That's awesome.
Did he get fired for that? Nope. I think he quit like a week. It was like a horrible job.
Yeah, it's car wash now. I knew he was
God, what were your issues?
I was in Parky for like 2 months. Santa was sick, so I worked on Thursday. She got her temp sick on and I quarantined on Thursday.
Where'd you occupy your COVID?
I mean, I hung out with Hannah. She already had COVID, that's already supposed to her. Well, can't get more sick. What a bummer. Gross. A lot of days. Me watched the entire X-Men series.
It's so good.
It's pretty good. Just like a lot of fun Disney Plus.
And I don't know that.
Pretty much just that. Yeah, watched a lot of basketball last week. Great.
Did I ever watch the season
I
basketball?
don't even watch basketball when I watch it.
My parents.
How do you know if it's over?
So annoying. My parents in high school, my freshman year, wrote me a note on Wednesday and school office that I was struggling in school. So I would get in and I'd go watch March Madness all day, Thursday to Friday. My parents just like signed me out for the year. Last year was the first year I didn't watch it. My first year I didn't watch it. That was my argument. I'm like, if you're gonna watch any class, you can just sign me out and have straight A's. Pretty much, like one or the other. So like, by my senior, my friends' parents started doing the same thing. So like, we just all be chilling. You guys go? I guess I was in Eden, so I didn't get to say. Yeah, everybody was funny because quarantine, like, I don't really care about quarantine. It's just happy because like, I don't want to make anybody else work. I still like going to the store, like, and it just like sit out. I pick up groceries for people and I talk to them. It's probably. Robert Vaughn, in Florida. After tomorrow, there'll be 16. Well, everybody was you're not in Slack, are you? I'm in Slack. But you're not in the Snapchat, are you? General, hashtag general. You are? Yeah, but you were having trouble seeing it. Some things don't show up. I don't know. See, I made a video for us. Started with you. Started with me. It started with my fiance. I guess you're back in October.
First beer.
And that's very good.
Yeah, that's fair. It was really funny. They're like, yeah, nobody else has gone the entire time. I'm like, I was like, yeah, him's the first person I'm forgetting about. I only
I love you to smaller group meetings. It is such a privilege and such an honor to be able to talk to you guys about what the biggest thing that I personally see that translates from what you learn in leadership to the marketplace. And so when I went through leadership, like I remember thinking like, wow, this is like so much information, and I don't know like if I'm going to be able to remember it all, but it really comes in together and helps you to become a good leader, a good Christian, and a good friend. And so the biggest thing that I learned in leadership that translates to the marketplace is number one, being able to share your story with others. Number two, having others share their story with you. Number three, following up on that connection. And number four is creating that genuine social connection, which in the marketplace will then be a professional connection. And so these four things which you learn in leadership will help you to create your small group. And so I remember when I started looking for a job, I talked to job recruiters, and I asked them about what they were mostly looking for. And what they were looking for was really someone that would be able to hold a conversation, that was sociable, and really just a nice person to be around. Someone with which would make a connection with them. And so the reason why job recruiters look for this is because, like everyone in the job fairs at CSU have degrees, have certificates, right? And so what differentiates them is this social aspect. And so once I got an internship, I saw this again in that what we were evaluated most on was not how well we know accounting or how well we balance the balance sheet or how well we balance debits and credits. And so it was because I was doing like an accounting internship, and I was expecting that I would be evaluated more on my technical skills, right? The ability to do the job, rather than anything else. But in our evaluations, what I saw the most was that we were evaluated on the social aspect. We were evaluated on how well we worked with the team, how well we connected with the client. And so these are all things which you learn in leadership, which is how to connect with people to create genuine connections. And so I just wanted to encourage you that what you're learning in leadership is not only an investment into the kingdom of God, but it's also an investment into your professional career. Because what you're learning in leadership about connecting with people, about having a genuine, friendship, genuine social connection, professional connection, those things are going to translate into the professional world, and you're going to stand out from those who have not had this type of training. And so I just encourage you to just go out there and win CSU for Jesus. And go out there and create these connections. Make friends, create your small group. And so God bless you guys. Love you, and go CSU.
Love Omar. All right, so we are setting ourselves up for success. We're going out there. We're trying to find ourselves in places where we can actually find someone to connect with. And then the second thing is start the conversation. Now, some of these things are so obvious. It's like, well, okay, yeah. And yet, we have to kind of think about it and process that. And so how do you start the conversation? Well, honestly, it depends on the context. But oftentimes, if we're out there like on the contact table on the plaza, something I love to do is telling small group leaders, all right, see that, guy, he's about 10 seconds away. Start a conversation with him. And you just have to whatever comes out, doesn't matter. Just something has to come out. And it's amazing, all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's hilarious what you can do if you just are observant, right? And this is a very specific context, but there's so many times where I'm out there and I'm like, hey, cool boots, dude. And all of a sudden we have this 5-minute conversation about, how they grew up in the country and they're doing ag business, and yeah, I'm part of a campus ministry, and like, do you have any history there? And they're like, oh, you know, I kind of dabbled with this or whatever. Like, oh, that's cool. You interested in any of that? And like, it's amazing how quickly things just kind of shift towards, you know, hey, cool sports team. How are, you know, how's so and so, you know, are you enjoying watching this year that sports team, that hobby that's on their hat, that lifestyle that's in their shoes, that whatever, that book, that class book that they're, you know, holding in their hand. Like, if you can just observe something, it doesn't have to be cool. It doesn't have to be anything. You just have to say something. Just say something and get the conversation started. And I can't tell you how many people we've gotten over the years in our ministry because of ridiculous conversation starters that just, in fact, I think Brent, right? So here's Brent, really one of my core right-hand people in the ministry. And I'm pretty sure the first thing he ever heard from a Chi Alpha staff was, hey, you like steaks? And he said, yeah. And the conversation happened from there. So he's like, well, we're going to go grill some steaks. You want to come hang out with us? And he's like, what? Who are you? What? So, you know, just open your mouth and see what comes out. It's amazing if you just start the conversation, what can happen from there. Now, if you are trying to look cool while meeting someone, it's over. It's already done. It's already done. Now, it's not that you can't be cool. You know, you're gonna talk to these, like, sometimes these freshmen, and you're gonna get a little bit older, you know, classmate kind of thing going on, and you know, there's whatever. That's great. But if you're coming in, it's kind of like I kind of laughed. So I go to this gym down the street here, and I was watching this YouTube video that I was trying to watch one of these professional weightlifter guys, and I was trying to like do his workout, you know, much smaller weights, but kind of following along. And it was leg day, and I just kind of, you need something to kind of push you on leg day, because nobody likes leg day. It's just horrible. Oh, masochist. But he, you know, he made this comment. He said, you know, he's kind of colorful language. He's not, you know, Christian or anything, but he said, you know, if you try to show off on leg day, you're screwed. Right? If you try to show off, because the point is, if you're trying to get stronger, you do certain weights, and it might not be as strong as you could, but you're not trying to do the full, you're not trying to max with like 3 reps. You're trying to like get a small weight that you can do a lot of reps on and get stronger at. But if you're trying to like show off, you're never going to get stronger. If you try to show off, if you try to be cool in reaching out, you are not going, it's over. You're screwed. If you go out there and say, you know what, for better or for worse, I'm going to get out there. I'm just going to try. You know, you're going to get stronger. But anticipate it's going to hurt a little bit. It's going to be a little sore. And yes, you're going to have success. That's not to say like, oh, you know, just embrace, you know, you're going to be weird and awkward. No, I'm not saying that at all. But don't work from that mindset. You're working from the mindset of loving God and expressing that. And you're going to learn as you try. Okay, talk about them. People are all a little egocentric. They love talking about themselves. It honors them and gives you insight into their lives at the same time if you ask them questions about them. Keep the conversation focused on them. That's the third step. Look for commonalities with you. Right? Remember, you're looking for, are they okay with you, Jesus, in your community? Look for those commonalities that you can work from. Or a sense of spiritual receptivity. Is there a sense, you get a sense, or you catch anything from their history that might be an open door to a conversation about the Lord, or maybe where they've had history with the church? A great place to ask about is like, what are you into on campus? What kind of clubs, what kind of groups, what kind of things? Because the fourth thing, mention Chi Alpha, if it hasn't come up yet, is a natural progression when you've asked enough questions about them. Because the fourth thing, so talk about them and look for an open door. Don't just talk about them. You know, this is where the outline is just an outline. It's just here to kind of help. But talk about them And when you see that opening, man, go for it. It's like, well, what were you into in like high school? It's like, well, I was really on the football team and had this, youth group that I kind of was a part of. Oh yeah. Do you love, do you have a community that you found, like that here on campus, or do you have a relationship with God, or what's your faith been like since you've come to college? One of those, not all of those. I would just, but just kind of ask a question. Yeah, ask 5 questions and then let them answer. No, just ask one. Play it cool. Come across casually, pursue intensely. That's a different one. We'll talk about later. But you want to come across casually. Don't be overly intense. You want to pursue intensely, but you want to come across casually. So don't be like, yeah, that's so. Oh yeah. Just be cool, man. It's like the guy with nervous talking to the pretty girl. It's like, I don't know what to say. It's just like, just chill. It's gonna be okay. Ask questions. Talk about them. There's a lot of great principles to dating that come into small group leading. But mention Chi Alpha if it hasn't come up yet. So the 4th step, mention Chi Alpha. So, hey, you've had this conversation, you're talking about, them, and mention hey, a great way is hey, what are you into on campus? That's a great just natural progression. What are you into? And then just kind of assert, well, I'm part of a few things myself. I'm part of a campus ministry, and we're just, out here talking about the Lord. Just curious if you have any thoughts on God. Right? And see what happens. And they'll either shut down, and that's okay, but you've done it as a question. Right? You've opened the door towards a spiritual conversation, you've left it with a question, and they can kind of take it or leave it from there. So mention Chi Alpha if it hasn't come up yet. That's a great just thing. If they have a decent level of social intelligence and you're asking them questions, they should eventually start responding. But that's not always going to be the case. I mean, you talk to a lot of students at different places of social intelligence. They may, just love to talk about themselves, and that's about as far as it goes. They'll never respond. Just so assert it if it doesn't naturally come up. But mention Chi Alpha. When opportunity, this is something just to learn, is that when opportunity to talk about yourself naturally arises, don't pass up the moment to bring up your community. Doesn't mean it has to be the only thing. It's like, oh, you're into snowboarding? Really? Oh, that's all. I'm into Chi Alpha. Right? No, just, yeah, I'm into snowboarding too. That's awesome. My small group that I'm a part of here on campus is going snowboarding here in a couple of weeks. Have you ever hung out with campus ministry? Right, so just bring up Chi Alpha as you can there. Step 5, ask a more focused God question. Now, if you've done step 3s and 4, oftentimes this will naturally happen next. But just saying, hey, okay, mention Chi Alpha. Yeah, I'm part of this campus ministry, and we're just, we get together quite a bit, going snowboarding here in a week. Do you have any history with campus ministry? No, I've never really been part of that. That's fine. What are your thoughts on God? So take it a step further if you can. So talk about your community. That's the main thing. So you just open the door. But when you can, look for that opportunity to take it just a step further. And the goal is not for you to present the gospel. The goal is not for you to talk about your testimony. The goal is not for you to talk so much as it is about asking them God questions and getting them to talk about their thoughts on God. That's more the objective. You'll get there. I mean, if they're interested, if they're open to you, Jesus, your community, guess what? You'll have all kinds of weekly meetings and outpost lives, all kinds of things to talk. But right now, what you're trying to do is you're just trying to talk to them and ask them their questions. You're going to have a much better sense of what to say if you're doing a good job asking them about their thoughts first anyways. And it honors them as well. And it expresses love of Christ. And it can be anything. Honestly, if you're intentional, if you're really thinking about it, it'll come up. I know any number of things can happen. It just depends on the situation, but let the Holy Spirit guide you. And sometimes, I love when I find out somebody's in the hard sciences, right? Because then I'll just go there. And I know I'm like the professional campus minister, but this is what I learned doing this myself, whether as a student or then as staff or otherwise. But just ask, like, oh man, you're really into biology? That's so interesting. So I'm a Christian, and I have my own thoughts on how, that all works. But I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on reality as a biologist? Like, do you think this is all an accident, or does something help guide evolution, or what are your thoughts on how that all works? Don't attack, whatever your thoughts are on, young Earth, old Earth, whatever. But you're just asking questions like, hey, I kind of have these, I'm kind of curious, like, what are your thoughts? But ask the question about their major from a God question, right? Just direct it that way. And the amazing thing about questions is it's non-threatening. It's non-threatening because you're giving them the ball. You said, here, why don't you just share? But you're going there because what you're trying to do is, again, you're looking at, are they okay with you, Jesus, in your community? And so that's your goal. Your goal is not to say the gospel. Your goal is to figure out if they're open to the gospel. And so ask those questions, ask God questions, questions about community, talk about, your community, all that kind of stuff, but go there. And then the last step in this whole progression is at that point, you're assessing. Hey, are they okay with, you think they're okay with me, Jesus, in my community? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to lay the foundation to work from in the future, right? So now if you invite them to come hang out with you later, it's not this weird bait and switch when they suddenly think there's going to be a kegger at the party you're inviting them to and suddenly find out there's root beer. Right, yeah. So it's, but then you can actually direct the conversation towards hobbies and towards interests and towards focusing it on, on what do they want? Because right now you've hopefully kind of assessed, are they okay with you, Jesus, in your community? And what do you think they might connect with? Like, oh, we have these commonalities, we have these common hobbies. So let's focus there, start with what they want, and move towards what they need. And so we'll get to more of that as we talk about fighting for people, fighting for them to have experiences with you, Jesus, in your community. But last thing is assess if to filter or fight. So just because you had a conversation with someone, you went through all this whole thing, doesn't mean that they're interested in your fighting for them, your pursuit of them. And so assess that. And if you feel like, I get, a lot of times we'll find small group leaders at the start of the year will spend so much time trying to pursue someone who kind of awkwardly didn't know what to say when you asked for their number, and so they gave it to you, and so they'll spend so much time trying to pursue those connections with people who really don't have any interest that they're not spending enough time going out there and actually reaching out to people who maybe would if you just were out there enough to find them. And so you only have so much to give. Now the question then comes up, well, how do we reach the world then? Right? You're only finding the ones who want it. Well, I'm not saying the ones who want it. They just have to be open enough to have the friendship to go there. But what about the ones who don't? And that gets into where we start talking about life of ministry, because they're not going to be reached by you in intentional outreach. That's just not going to happen. So it needs to be more from them being fought for by people in their world. It's going to take a longer process of them experiencing Christ through relationships they have naturally in their world. So we'll get to that later. But in this, we're looking for that. Now, there's a Hail Mary, and I shouldn't even say it that way. That makes it sound way too unlikely. But in this moment, if you're like, dude, this guy is not interested in me. The moment I mentioned Christian community, he was like looking for the door. If you can, use that moment to fight for them in that moment. And fighting for someone is to fight for them to have an encounter with you, Jesus, or your community. In this moment, most naturally that means look for an opportunity to minister to them in that moment, right? If you just took their number and tried to, connect with them next week, they're not going to be interested, and tomorrow, and they're just going to ignore you. But if in that moment you can take this moment and say, all right, let me just minister in this moment and say, dude, have a great day. I just feel like though maybe this is the Lord, maybe this isn't, but I feel like the Lord maybe would say this to you right now. And just go for it. Because guess what? You're not going to get another opportunity to minister the gospel after that second. So guess what? Swing for the fences. Minister in that moment. Take the opportunity to just express the love of Christ into their life and go for it. And guess what? All of a sudden, I know like one girl that I could think of, like where it was like a bunch of LTC students, I think, going out there and praying for people. And it was a couple different people. It was somebody on staff, I think it was Brent, and a couple small group leaders and some LTC students. But anyway, this girl just kept interacting with our community, and people kept asking to pray for her. And well, they swung for the fences. They just asked if they could pray for her. And guess what happened when suddenly God healed her? Oh, she was never interested in Jesus or our community. But because they swung for the fences, she became a follower of Christ who would walk away from a very dramatically different lifestyle. In big part because of that girl over there, Jen, and become a small group leader for us years ago. So in that moment, if you're going to filter that person, like, okay, that's all right, I'm just going to move on. That's okay. Move on. But use that moment, minister in the moment, swing for the fences, and let the Lord speak through you, and look for opportunities to minister to them in that moment. All right. Last thing here, and then we're going to do a little Q&A if you guys have any. But start by filling your capacity with finding. So this is a real practical just thought, and this is especially true for the start of the year for you guys. Start the year by thinking through how much of my life, we talked about last week, like this is loosely a small group leaders week, how much time we're asking for. It's loosely like 5 extra hours that we're asking for with like kind of one-on-one type conversations or time and space. So fill that 5 hours with finding until you have found enough people to fight for that your capacity is filled, right? Now there's a different concept, like, well, once I fill that, then I never have to find again. No, that again, we'll get into that with like lifestyle of ministry, like you're always looking for opportunities to be the hands and feet of Jesus in your world. But as a concept, yeah, like, okay, this is my small group commitment. I'm just investing this into the community, and I don't have anybody to fight for or to feed yet. Fine, go find them. Use that time. Like, well, this would probably be a good time for me to like have like a one-on-one. We'll talk about that again too later this semester. But yeah, this would be probably time I would spend time with guys if they were open to it. Great. Go out there. You don't have a one-on-one to have that week. Don't have lunch plans that day. Well, go find somebody to have lunch plans with for the future, right? Fill that capacity until you get beyond that finding phase and you're able to fill that time with fighting for people. But the small group leaders, if they just say, well, I don't have anybody, so I'm not, I don't have anything to do, well, it's like, okay, fill that capacity with finding until you get there, and you will. Now, just a basic principle here that I think it'd be nice to mention in this moment as we're starting to do more outreach stuff here this week and all of that, is talking about really the 3 phases of success. So fill your capacity with finding. And remember when you're going out there and trying to find people that there's really 3 ways of defining success. I don't have time to do an exhaustive job here. But there is internal success, which has to do with motivation. If you go down, Chad, on that page, keep going down. Yeah, keep going down. Start by filling your capacity with finding. Click that one, go down. All right, right there. So these are the 3 forms of success, and you need all 3. Internal success is the motivation. Are you loving God and people when you reach out this week? And that's going to be your question. Are you expressing love to Jesus right now? Because if your motivation is anything else, to show off, to prove something to yourself or to your community, to I don't know. You know, try not to hurt your ego too much by being good at this. Like if your motivation is anything other than love, and we talked about that in your intro interviews, that's going to be a bad deal. And honestly, that's the highest form of success for us, is our motivation. Are we expressing love to Jesus? Jesus said, love God, love your neighbor. All the law and the prophets is built on that. And all the law and the prophets is all of the to-dos. That all of the to-dos are expressions of loving God, loving your neighbor. So if that is there, then you are succeeding. And remember that and know that. Now the second one is also internal success, but this one has to do with methods. Are you doing what you can control? You can't control what they're going to do, what their thought life is, what their spiritual journey is. You can't control how they respond to the gospel any more than God could have to Adam or Jesus could have to the rich young ruler. But are you doing what you can do? Are you, Jonah, going out there to give them a chance? Are you giving them a shot? Are you like Ezekiel when God said, their blood is on your hands if you don't go, but if you go out there, whatever they do, you're good? Are our methods there? And then the third one is external success, which is what we're always fighting for, what we're looking for, and yet that's really the lowest level of success for a small group leader. It comes through the other two. However, the external success, meaning like, hey, we're succeeding at building a small group community, and we're effective at ministering the gospel, and we're seeing people come to the Lord, and we're seeing people, we're replicating our ministry and all of that. That is important. That should be a goal. That should be a why, at least to how I express love as I seek through what I do to accomplish that goal, because God is worthy to see our campus transformed. And oftentimes that external success refines our methods, right? I go out there and I'm like, okay, well, I try to reach out, but maybe I could have done a better job lingering in that relationship, and I could have prioritized them a little bit more. Am I fighting for them? And I just invited them all the time. I never pursued them. So that didn't work so good. So it actually, the external success will refine your methods, and it will challenge your motivation, right? It's like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And when I experience success, am I doing it for love or for my ego? When I experience failure, am I doing it again? Is it worthy because I'm succeeding? So those three, just keep those in mind as we start stepping out in outreach, even this week. If you guys' heart, if you have external success and not the motivation to express love to God, it's like, Paul would say you're a clanging cymbal in 1 Corinthians 13, right? If your motivation isn't there. But if your motivation is love, and I'm going to love people by sitting in my room, that's not love either. Going out there and fighting for them the way that Jesus fought for us. And that's what you guys are doing right now. So express love to Jesus this week. All right. Any questions? Any questions we got? Oh, we do. Okay. Sweet. Is it inevitable that at some point in finding people you would be seen as a stalker? Not if you're doing it well. No, not if you're doing it well. If you get accused of being a stalker, come talk to me. I think that external metric needs to refine that internal metric a little bit. But I'm doing what I can do. I show up at their dorm at 2 a.m. and I call them all the time, and there is a place. But no, the answer is no. And that's actually a little bit more when it comes to fighting for people. We'll talk about kind of like pursuing people, which is amazing. And it was so lost in Christianity today. And yet, So honestly, if you're doing a good job, we can talk through, again, filtering. I think if you never filter, it can become that way, right? If you never say, hey, are you okay with you, Jesus, in your community? They say no, and you keep trying to force it. That's where it kind of gets that way a little bit. But if they're okay with you, Jesus, in your community, you keep working from there. What's another question? What can you do to avoid heated debates on the Lord? Yeah, I mean that's a much more intensive question than I can answer simply right now, aside from simply to say your goal, if you get heated, you're not loving, right? You're not loving. And so you got to be the one who takes the hits and takes the brunt of a culture that is not loving. And you need to be more loving than the culture. So how you do that is in part asking questions. If you're asking questions, now if they show up to your small group meeting, they have walked into your thing, right? You have free reign to now kind of go there and proclaim the truth of the gospel, and they know what they're walking into, right? They know what they're walking into. And even there, we'll get into like how to have a weekly meeting, and it should have lots of conversation and all that kind of stuff. And so there gives safety within the friendship that you're fighting for early on. But if you go there too quickly, if there's not a love encounter, if there is not a friendship, then the truth encounter, the gospel, can create a lot of debate. But if your focus is assessing if they're okay with you, Jesus, in your community, by asking questions about their spirituality, making it clear who you are and what you're about and what you're into and all that, you're not really looking for a debate. You can look for a discussion later after the friendship is being developed, and you suddenly have this platform through the love encounter to express the truth encounter, and now it's in an environment that's far more relational and loving, and through that, far more grace-filled to be able to have those kinds of conversations. All right, what's another one? This rough outline works really well for a socially intelligent person who responds to questions and starts asking questions back, etc. How would this process change when meeting someone socially unintelligent? Yeah. Do we keep pressing on by asking them questions and getting to know them, even if they seem like they don't want to respond? Yeah, no, that's a good question. Like, I mean, if you get somebody that just doesn't pick up on the social cues in that way, and you will. Goodness, I have my socially unintelligent years. I'm sure many of us have. But maybe sometimes I still do. But yes. So the answer is, if you get to someone like that, but they are responding to your conversation, by your asking questions, then you can find it can be fairly easy actually with people like that to just assert a thought in there too. You can actually jump fairly easily, and it's not weird because they don't know how to ask, but they kind of assume you're going to talk. Generally, that's because somebody has spent enough of their life in their relationships being so assertive about themselves that they don't know how to engage them. They had a parent who was just so I'm just going to tell you all my stuff, whether or not you want it, right? So you asking questions is going to be somewhat strange. This is a very specific. This is not every time, but if you understand what I'm getting at. If you start asking questions, they're engaging, but they just are engaging by talking about themselves, then it's okay to assert at some point, some of the things I'm really into is I really spend a lot of my time with my Christian community. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on God? Right, so just direct it that way. We had an exercise some years ago, we don't do anymore, but the other thing is you learn to direct the conversation through questions. I had an exercise a few years ago where we asked them, in 5 questions or less, bring a conversation to Jesus, just by asking questions. So you would have to go out on campus, talk to somebody, just ask them questions, and bring the conversation to Jesus. And I remember one of our small group leaders years ago, Bobby, was at the airport. It was right before spring break. He was flying home to California. On the way, he was at the airport at DIA, saw somebody with a CSU hoodie on, walked over, sat down, struck up a conversation, Just say, hey, you go to CSU, what are you studying? Had like, he said it took only 3 questions. He said, but is that good enough to bring it to Jesus? I'm like, yeah, if it takes 1 question to bring it to Jesus, that's great. He's like, wow, it was so easy. If I was just intentional to not just ask whatever popped in my head, but intentionally directing the conversation towards the Lord by asking questions that could lead to the Lord. And so that's another thing to kind of think about. All right, what other questions we got? How do I not judge the soil or make sure I'm open to talking to everyone without judging them beforehand? That's a good question. Yeah, that's a real honest question. I think that's a good one. I think a couple of things I would say. One, take it from an older minister, not old, but right. Take it from an older big brother type. I have seen more times than I could count the guy or the gal who I thought not a fat chance was the one who become the dynamic follower of Jesus in our ministry, and the one that I thought, that's the future of our ministry, fall flat on their face. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. And so I would just say, just take it from those of us who've come before. You don't know. Your job isn't to assess that. Your job is to give opportunity for the world to make that decision. And so do your best, and that comes in all kinds of other conversations about, how we judge the world and all those kind of things. But just your job is to look for opportunities to minister and let the chips fall where they may. All right, for the sake of time, we're just going to keep flying through. Any others? All right, that's perfect. That was great, guys. Thank you for those questions. Those were really good. We are going to go into here in just a minute. We're going to go into cohort time. And practically, now a couple practical things here real quick. One, make sure you've signed in. 2, had some questions this week from a couple different people asking questions about like attendance, like how does this work again? If I have to be real strict about how to define it, basically, if you are online because you can't be here in person or don't feel comfortable being here in person, we would rather you be here in person unless you are like COVID exposed or just don't feel comfortable with a larger group right here, right now. That's okay, but you need to be fully present. So if you're watching online, you're not just kind of like flipping Netflix while I'm kind of chatting on your couch next to you. Like, it needs to be fully focused as if you were here right now. So if you do that, that's fine. That's totally fine. Otherwise, just if you can't make it, you get 3 misses, and so you can watch later. You can watch the live stream and do a quick report that you just listened to it, and that's totally okay. So we're going to go into practicals for this week. You're going to find 4 people this week, and this is going to happen for the next couple of weeks. So we want you guys to kind of create a little bit of a rhythm of your life. Just spend some time, say, God, help me out with this, and the ministry and the community is going to help you out with this as well. But we're going to go out there, and we want you to pray for 2 people that you don't know. Now, if it's like, well, I kind of said hi to that person once during my class, that's fine. But it shouldn't be like your small group leader. Like pray for 2 people that you don't know, and have 2 conversations about the Lord with somebody that you don't know, and ask good questions and bring it there. Now, you can pray for 4 people. And just try to bring it to the Lord through that, and that's fine. In fact, prayer is a good way to kind of go there. So we're going to have cohort leaders talk through this with you guys, but an easy example is like, hey, go out on campus and just ask the Lord, who do you want me to pray for? And if you feel that prompting, just walk around. If you feel that prompting, then stop and say, Lord, is there anything you thought maybe I could share with that person? It doesn't have to be like, thus saith the Lord, you saw like an angel in heaven and you had, but just like you sense in your spirit, like the Lord's kind of guiding you in a specific way. Lord, what would you have me share with that person? And then you can go up to them and just say, hey, we were just walking around, we're praying, and I just felt like the Lord's maybe directed me to pray for you. Is there anything I can pray for? And they're like, oh, no, I'm not interested. It's like, okay, have a great day. Or you can say, like, hey, I just felt like maybe the Lord said this. Does that make sense? Does that sound kind of like where you're at? And either before you even pray or after you just take a moment, say, hey, you mind if I pray? And sometimes it can be good. I mean, we're all used to being on the campus, any number of, things going on out there. So it can be good to say, like, hey, I'm not going to take up much of your time here. It could be good to just kind of preface, like, hey, this isn't like a trap here that you're going to be stuck if you engage me. Just say, like, hey, I was going to pray for you. This will take like 3 minutes, and I can totally peace out. Like, sometimes you preface that, then they're actually more interested in engaging, other than the wall that sometimes comes up first. But just ask a God question. Like, hey, have you ever had the Lord speak to you in your life before, or ever feel like you've ever had an encounter with God in your life? So I just felt like maybe the Lord told me to pray for you. Is there anything I can pray for you about? Right, so that's just one example, and your cohort's going to help you think through that. The ministry is going to be doing some things this week. We have what we call spiritual readings tent, which we haven't done for a couple of years, but is actually really cool. You think that sounds weird? Well, that's okay. We'll get into that, but it's definitely the best way that we've been able to figure out how to pray. We've set up a tent on campus, and we just say, hey, anybody that wants prayer. If we say prayer, it's not saying, hey, to the community, it doesn't make sense that we're going to actually ask the Lord for a word for them. If we say, hey, it's, this is a place, there isn't another way of saying it that would actually make sense to the community. So we call it a spiritual readings tent, where we just tell them right away, like, hey, we're Christians, and we believe in a God who speaks to us. And if you would like us to pray with you, we would love to just take a moment, pray, and ask the Lord if there's anything he'd like to share with you today. If that sounds scary, that's okay. We're going to do it with you. And so you won't go in there by yourself. We'll always have a couple small group leaders kind of do it together. And we've had people get saved in that. We've had people get physically healed, even casting demons out of someone. Don't worry, again, we're going to do this with you, so don't stress. But if you would like to, this is not a mandatory thing, but the ministry is going to do that on Thursday this week from, I believe, 10 to 2, if I remember right. And we'll have more details for you guys if you show up there and then. But it's a cool way for us just to, minister to people. People come in very curious about spirituality and Christianity when we do that. The week after that, we're going to do more just a contact table and go prayer walking from the contact table. Your cohorts will have some plans that they're going to talk to you about here right now. And feel free to talk to your small group leader and just say, hey, you mind if we go out and see if we can find somebody to pray for and talk to today. And so just use the community. We want to do this together. We want to do this with you guys. And don't think like, hey, this is just an exercise. Go start building your small group. Go find some people that are lonely or needing the love of God in their life. And be ready to fight for somebody. Look for that opportunity. And so, once you guys go ahead and head out, if you have your cohort leader here, go get with them. Otherwise, they should have reached out to you with a way to connect with them online or whatever other way. If you're online, they should have connected with you. But just go ahead and get together with your cohort next half an hour, just talking through practically what your cohort's going to do and some thoughts for you guys as we jump into finding people who we can fight for. All right, thanks for the time, guys.
No, like it really works out. I
What's that?
and then I say it.
How so? Oh, well, come on. Sweet. I didn't know if I was covered up by the... Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Ryan got my good side. Shaved that this morning.
Wow, that's amazing.
During the discussion.
Hey, are you international students? They're like, yeah. And I was like, I want to make international friends. He's like, really? I want to
Yeah.